Thank you. All right. So just to kind of jump right in a little bit, who are we and what do we do? So Root-Pike Watershed Initiative Network, which is, I know, a little bit of a mouthful, but we work to initiate and find funding for restoration projects that progress water quality throughout southeastern Wisconsin. So we do things like stream bank and prairie and wetland restoration efforts, all based on these critical 9 key element plans, which you can find on our website up here. That's at www.rootpikewind.org, which is down in the lower left side of the screen. And we use these plans to determine critical areas that we can work on restoration. We also do smaller versions of restoration with our pollinator patch program that takes lawn or turf and actually transitions that to habitat at schools and businesses and parks and things like that. And then we have the Respect Our Waters program, which does stormwater education and outreach for 20 municipalities within southeastern Wisconsin. It's what is affording for me to be here and speak with you tonight. And they have a permit that they have to satisfy every year with the Department of Natural Resources that says that that community is reaching out to their community to share education on stormwater. So just to kind of revisit, we all live in a watershed, and contrary to the name, a watershed is actually land and water, and it's named after that water body in which the rainfall hitting that area of land will flow into an effect. So everything falling on this side is going to flow over here into a water area, and this is all going to flow over here and be named after this water area. So remembering that water cycle, we have water that's going to evaporate from soils and water bodies, and it's going to condense into the air, turn from gas to liquid, where it's going to precipitate as rain, snow, sleet. It's going to hit various surfaces when it hits the ground. So sometimes it will get infiltrated if it hits things like wetlands or different plant life, or it's going to hit other types of surfaces, run off into other water bodies where that cycle can restart. But if we take a step back, this is the Root-Pike Basin. So we work to restore, protect, and sustain the Root-Pike Basin as an environmental nonprofit. This is 1.6 million residents that impact this area every day, and that's only here in southeastern Wisconsin. If we can imagine all of the different areas around Lake Michigan, how many people impact Lake Michigan and the other Great Lakes. And that's important because Lake Michigan is freshwater. I am unsure if this was in the description of the class, but I am curious, and I do have a poll that I could throw out there. And I think I can do that. Yep, let's launch it. How much of the world's water is drinkable fresh water? Feel free to go ahead and throw in that poll. You guys are real close. Two more people. Otherwise, we can end that poll early. There we go. Two more. All right, so we'll take a look and share the results here. I don't know if you guys can see that. So we've got about 3 people who thought 10 to 24, 3 people who thought 5 to 9, and 5 out of 11 who thought less than 5. So you are correct, those 5 people. It is actually 3%. It's a very low number. And according to the Environmental Protection Agency, all 5 of these watersheds are impaired. If you live within this water, within this basin, you live next to one of the most rare and critical freshwater resources on the planet. And if we think about what affects this water, it's growth and urbanization. And that makes a lot of sense. More and more people and moving further and further out and creating developments. So if we think about what happens with developments, we have things coming in and taking plant life out. So you've got a lot of bare soil, and then things go in like roads and sidewalks and parking lots and lots of rooftops and buildings and driveways. And these all have something in common. These are all impervious. These are waterproof. They don't soak up water. So what they do instead is they act like a slide. Anytime water falls onto them, it's going to flow over it, and it's going to collect whatever's on that surface and bring it to nearby bodies of water very quickly. plant life. So we look at lawn as plants. Obviously, it is a plant. However, it is not great at soaking up water. It's about this long of roots, about as tall as it is on the top is how much is on the bottom. And so it's not really great at soaking up water. So we actually consider that more of an impervious surface. So there are a lot of sources of pollutant to local freshwater, and that comes from everyday actions. So we can, taking a step back as well, Root-Pike understands that this is not just an individual issue, that this is a cumulative effect. So it's individuals, it's governments, it's corporations, it's groups big and small. And we do work with individuals, but we also work with elected officials and Department of Public Works officials, businesses, corporations. We are touching base with all of these entities because it is not going to be solved with a new treatment plant. It is not going to be solved with a new sewage system. It is a cumulative thing, and everybody plays a part, and we all have to do our part to make an actual effort for something to change. So when we start thinking about this stuff, it's a really good way to start thinking about how can we stop that stormwater from moving over those surfaces and collecting those pollutants to bring it to water bodies. How can we prevent that water from ever leaving your property in the first place? A great way to do that is to infiltrate it before it moves. So we have got rain barrels is a great way to do that. You can prevent that basement and yard flooding. You can save that water, collect it when it's actually available, and use it when it's not. And your plants like that rainwater better than anything you can pull out of your tap because it doesn't have chlorine or it doesn't have minerals. And all that while you're protecting local resources and decreasing your home water runoff up to 25% per home each year, which is a very large amount for just adding a rain barrel. We can also plant a rain garden. A rain garden is very unique, and it's specifically designed to absorb rainwater, which is great because then you're protecting against yard and basement flooding, but you don't have to water your plants, which is really nice. They're going to be located in places that receive that flash flooding, so near a downspout or the lowest lying area of your yard, and it's crafted from a dug out depression, and that's planted with native plants. And we'll talk about why native plants are going to be the answer to a lot of these different questions. But without this infiltration, that stormwater is going to hit the surfaces, it's going to move off your property where it can collect those pollutants and go to nearby water bodies. So although there are a lot of sources of pollution to local freshwater resources that come from everyday actions, we're going to focus today on those lawn care maintenance practices that negatively impact local freshwater resources. So from the choice of plants that you choose to the way that you care for them, the way that landscaping is performed can drastically alter local freshwater environments, either for the better or for the worst. Not every method of landscaping and yard maintenance is going to be the same. So I get this a lot. Why, you may wonder, like, why would grass clippings, leaves, and soil be bad for water quality? It's naturally occurring, right? It seems like it should be natural into natural and not a problem. But never in the history of the world has there been so much landscaping happening at once and so many impervious surfaces to take that landscaping and move it quickly to water bodies at rates and amounts that it cannot handle. And the problem is what these things break down into. They break down into phosphorus and nitrogen. Phosphorus and nitrogen feeds algae. So you may have seen this at different lakes. This is very toxic. You know, obviously we don't want to swim and swim in that water or drink from it, but think of all the non-human animals that utilize this as a resource. And the problem is when that phosphorus and nitrogen is in that water, the algae is eating it really quickly and it's creating oxygen, which sounds great. But the minute that phosphorus and nitrogen are gone, the oxygen goes with it. And now we have dead zones. We have zones where fish and macro and micros cannot live, and those are basis of the food chain. And now we have areas of water that is literally just dead water. So moving on to the idea of lawn and garden fertilizers, which are literally phosphorus and nitrogen in a bottle. Anything that you put onto a plant or onto your lawn that cannot be absorbed by that plant is going to run off. It's going to be pollution. It only takes a pound of nitrogen to create 70 pounds of that algae. So we always ask, have you tested your soil? Perhaps sometimes I've heard like, well, my tulips, and I'm thinking, well, tulips are not from Kenosha. So perhaps that's not the right thing. And that's why it needs a lot of amendments or it's suffering, right? So we always ask that first. Using those lawn clippings, we know that lawn clippings have biodegrade into phosphorus and nitrogen, and that's what you would purchase as a fertilizer. So use them, cut your lawn a little bit higher and leave those lawn clippings on there to biodegrade on your lawn, and you're going to naturally fertilize your lawn. If you are going to fertilize, do it in the fall because that's when it's soaking up all of that extra energy before it goes dormant for the winter. So if you're gonna spend that money and put that time in, do it at the time when it's going to suck it up the most. And going native, and we'll talk about why that's going to be an answer for you when it comes to not needing to deal with fertilizers and other types of amendments. Invasive plant species. This is buckthorn. Once you know it, you will see it absolutely everywhere. This is where it is native. It's a European plant. This is where it's invasive now. This is where it is restricted now. So if you see this at a Stein's or something, please tell them that they need to remove that from their property. That is illegal to sell. The problem with things like buckthorn and other invasive plants is they don't have checks and balances. They do not have things that eat them or predate them, and therefore they can really run wild and take over large swaths of land that we actually, natives that have predation, cannot keep up with. So they are now not able to take over that land. And now we have a lot of things that our native pollinators and our native animals do not know what it is, and they're not getting the sustenance that they need. So what can we do about that? We can learn how to remove them, and we have options for that. So I have a volunteer interest form here. If you would like it, you can lay down the things that on there that you are interested in, and I can get back to you with things that match your interests. And one of them is learning how to identify and remove invasives from real local restoration sites here in southeastern Wisconsin. But I talk about this because herbicides is another one. And I'm not going to lie to you, herbicides are incredibly important to restoration efforts. You cannot remove buckthorn without herbicide. It's all about how it's used and that it's used properly to make sure that our water resources are not being polluted by herbicides. So there's some common things to think about. What's it being applied to? Are you trying to take out buckthorn? Or are you trying to take out Phragmites? Because what you're applying is different. What are you actually applying? When are you applying? Is it going to rain? Is it really cold and under 50, under freezing? Because if it is, a water-based herbicide is going to freeze. How are you applying it? Are you broad spraying it, or are you targeting something very specifically? Remembering that anything you're putting onto a plant that it cannot absorb will run off. So this is Meacham Preserve. Up here in the upper left would be like Regency Mall area. This is in Racine area. This used to be fallow farmland. There were drain tiles underneath, which was to keep that farmland moist. And now those drain tiles are actually has caused flooding issues, so they've had to be removed. And now we have beautiful natives growing, a lot of poplar trees that are popping up. This was last year. A really interesting beaver analog structure that went in to slow that erosion, to stop that soil from being pulled from the sides of stream banks downwards, because now we're getting a lot of sediment into the water. We've got that soil that's feeding algae, and then we also have sedimentation, which is causing issues for different fish and other sorts of macros and micros. They can't see, the plant life can't get sunlight when there's a lot of sedimentation, so that is slowing that. And that is an old quarry that is now being that has now been redone, and we've got one of the development firm guys, he's been in there planting willow trees, native willow trees. But I mention this because we are actually now utilizing drones to do that herbiciding, so that we can be very specific and spot treat very specific small locations away from people, away from animals, away from insects. So it's a really targeted way to do that. And they're actually planting with this now, they're seeding with it, which is very, very cool. So we've got another source of phosphorus and nitrogen, and that is grass clippings. This is a very standard stormwater pond. You'll see these in developments and by big buildings. There is nothing about this that is aesthetic. It is all about water storage. When a development goes in, it's putting in rooftops and impervious surfaces. So they must, by law, mitigate and put a pond in so that there is a place for all of that water to go when it rains. The problem with the standard stormwater pond is that the bar for it is so low, it is only about storage. It's not about water quality. We can see that it is mown right up to the edge, which is the #1 problem that I see all the time when we're looking at ponds in different neighborhoods. Our pond is algae filled. Well, if it's mown right up to the edge, that is putting, you can see the grass clippings, it's literally putting phosphorus and nitrogen directly into your water body. That's what's causing a lot of the algae growth. We also have these impervious surfaces nearby, so things like winter salt can easily fall in there. trash, cigarette butts, motor oil, all these different things can quickly fall into this water body because there is no barrier between the actual lawn and the water. It also encourages geese. I love geese. I have nothing against geese. Geese are native, but this is not natural and this is not native. The problem is geese really like that low mown grass because they can see around them. So that's why a lot of them will come to it at once. But that is not natural. And these ponds now have E. coli issues because of all of their fecal matter. So maybe instead of looking at it like this, we look at it like this, maybe something like this. I always say the fish tend to like this better, right? If we naturalize our ponds with a vegetated buffer, we have seen that there's less algae and less geese. So this is looking like a pretty nice pond right here. These are some pretty Monarda, a very naturalized pond setting. I see no algae and no geese, which is very cool. And I did want to share that Root-Pike Wind has been putting together a pond playbook. So we've been working with engineers, Sewer Pack, the Wisconsin DNR to put together a playbook for pond developments and retrofitting that shows how updating your stormwater ponds can save you money. It can save developers, pond owners, and HOAs a lot of money because that sedimentation we talked about has to get dredged out every 20, 30 years. And that is an expensive process. And if you own that pond or you're in an HOA, you are on the hook for that cost. So if you are interested in learning a bit more about this, or you would like that pond playbook when it is released, please private message me now with your name and email, and I will make sure to add you to a list where you can get that once it's published. So when choosing what to plant, there is a better or worse thing that you can do. Choosing native is the best and easiest way to protect and improve water quality while doing some great things for you. It's going to minimize lawn and basement flooding. Looking at the difference of size between these roots and these roots, you can see why. It's going to infiltrate more water. So if we look at the differences between these native plants and your turf grass, it's very obvious how these are going to very much infiltrate water. They're robust and fibrous roots. They're also a lot better at holding onto soil. So they're going to be better on the sides of a pond to hold that soil into place from wave erosion and different water action coming up and eroding that bank. But they're also going to pull out phosphorus and nitrogen and stick it back in the soil, pollutant processing as that water goes down, protecting our water and putting it in the soil where it is safe. 20 square foot of lawn is going to give you less than a gallon of infiltration per storm event. 20 square foot of natives is about 8 or over 8. That's a drastic difference for a small area. It's going to reduce your mowing and maintenance time. The less lawn you have to mow and maintain to where you're using gas to mow and then water to grow it and then gas to mow it again, which is kind of a bit of a crazy cycle. Not saying that lawn is not important. We obviously want kids to run around and play, and having areas of lawn is important, but knowing that you can minimize how much lawn you have and actually get a lot of benefit from it is very cool. The coolest thing about native plants is they are resilient. They are from our area. They know our weather. They know our climate. They like our soil. And there is a beautiful native plant that can really look very closely to a lot of these horticultural plants. So there really is a native plant for every situation that you have. But because that they know all of those things about our climate and that they like them, that makes them resilient. They don't need those fertilizers or amendments. They already do very, very well. And they are hands down the most important thing to preserving pollinator populations. Native plants are critical to their survival. They provide the appropriate amount and sources of nectar and pollen at the right times in the right amounts for those native pollinators. And we need those native pollinators because they pollinate our food crops. They're 2 to 3 times better at pollinating than a honeybee. No shade to honeybees. I like honeybees, but if we plant what native pollinators need, those pollinators will come back. Right now, we're moving honeybees around the country to pollinate apples and avocados and almonds and all these different things, and mixing these things up. And that's potentially an issue when we talk about colony collapse, right? We're mixing these bees up that are supposed to be in one place. So bringing those native pollinators back is a really easy and fulfilling way to make sure that we are securing our food sources into the future. The other interesting thing about non-native or horticultural plants versus a native plant is a non-native horticultural plant is made in a lab. It's somebody saying, I want this bloom type and this color, I want it to be this height, and then they're putting these things out into nature. That's can be a little bit nerve-wracking, because all of a sudden we've got these things that our native pollinators are not really sure what they are. Some of those things don't make nectar or pollen, and we're putting them out into nature kind of willy-nilly. So we are doing this on a smaller scale with our pollinator patch program. So this is Bose Elementary last year. This is my colleague Christy. She's chatting with a bunch of the students. This is Rob Dummert from Johnson's Nursery. They were wonderful in donating plants and coming down to help those kids plant it. This is Indian Trail Academy High School. We are working with them to implement their first pollinator patch. And then behind them is this large grassed swale that we are working to write grants on to get that completely transformed into a native bioswale. This is Summers Elementary. We were working on this literally last Friday. These pictures are from, so they're implementing their first pollinator patch, which is very neat. This is Lincoln Park. So this is right off of Lincoln Lagoon here. And you can see that we've got some issues in Lincoln Lagoon. This is in Kenosha. Rarick Pacific and the city of Kenosha worked together to put this patch in last year. And it's been really cool to see how many people have reached out about these patches. So these pictures were taken by a friend of mine. She reached out and said, my little girl was very nervous about bees. Somebody had scared her and said that they would hurt her if she got anywhere near them. So they went over there and they watched the bees going from flower to flower and talked about how they're very busy and we just leave them alone so that they can do their job. But it's been really neat to see these, to see people utilizing these spaces. So Root-Pike Wind partnered with UW Parkside in 2019 and began implementing the cross-country course pollinator patch. And you're welcome to visit. It's open to the public. And then our headquarters is right here over in phase 6. And here's the campus up here. But what's really neat about the UW Parkside pollinator patch is that it is 210 acres of various ecosystems, prairie, woods, wetlands, all within the Pike River watershed, with an approach to remove those invasive plants, plant those natives, all preferable to the rusty patch bumblebee, which is one of our native bumblebees. There's been burning, spot treatment, planting, maintenance and monitoring happening. This was their planting day. It's definitely a great photo op. We've got, you know, our suits and everything ready to go, but it is going really beautiful. And I definitely recommend taking a walk through there. This is Pritchard Park in Racine. So before it was a buckthorn jungle, it was 15 acres just prone to flooding through that buckthorn, a bunch of dying ash trees. And because there was so much buckthorn, it was shading out the actual natural prairie. So this was it once the buckthorn was completely removed. And now it is a native prairie. This is a really pretty place to take a walk. It's very passive. It's not huge. That was a bridge that was done by the Boy Scouts for the project itself. But this was all done for that rusty patch bumblebee, who has declined by 87% in the last 20 years. And what we have found is that when we plant what they like, they come back. And we've had confirmed sightings both here and at the cross-country course, which is very exciting. And this little guy is very helpful for grant writing as well, because these are prime areas for their habitat. We are able to get more restoration work done by focusing on making sure that we are bringing these guys back. I always throw this one in there because, as beautiful as the picture is, I wanted to throw out that there is one invasive species in this picture, and we are working to get rid of that. It's Queen Anne's lace, Queen Anne, European. So if you see that this spring, definitely feel free to pull that guy out. And lastly, I wanted to talk about Smolensky Park. This is in Mount Pleasant. This was 13 acres of fallow farmland that was converted to native prairie in 2018 between Root-Pike Wind and the village of Mount Pleasant. The endangered pollinators have been found there as well. And this year we had a council circle installed, this last year in 2022. So a council circle is part of different cultures. So from the Native Americans to the Vikings, it acts as a resting spot. So you can have eye-to-eye conversations with people with no one person kind of dominating the dialogue. So that is open for people to enjoy and visit, to walk your dogs. You can go do those things. Please pick up pet waste, as that is one of the also #1 significant sources of pollution to our waterways is actually pet waste. And I did not put that into the presentation today because it's a little off the subject of lawn maintenance, but please pick it up from your lawn because it has phosphorus and nitrogen, but it also has roundworms, parasites, and E. coli. So those types of things can be very dangerous. They can live for, parasitic eggs can live for years in your soil. So picking those things up, especially if you're a gardener or have kids or pets running around, is very, very important. Plus it will save water quality. But at the end of the day, what we love to do at Root-Pike Wind is to clean that stormwater and create places where people and our native pollinators want to be. So if you're interested in getting more involved with us, we would love to work with you. I have that volunteer interest form here. We have a calendar of events if you just want to kind of keep up with it that way. But really, if you are interested in these types of things, the most important thing is word of mouth sharing this information out there. And if you, I like to invest in people who are interested in this so that you can be an eco leader in your community. So when people have questions, they know to come to you. And if you have questions, you can come to me. And if I don't know, I can go to my contacts as well. We will find out the answers for you. We are happy to help you. I'm actually going to wait on questions. Sorry about that. And I'm going to turn it over to Ben French now, and we will take questions afterwards, right after we call the winners.
Okay, can everybody hear me all right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I don't think I want to do that. You're good. So can you see my presentation?
Not yet. It might be on the wrong, if you have double screen, it might be on the wrong screen.
Yeah, maybe.
But you guys are looking great. There we go.
I think if you just like hover up near it, because my if you minimize it, you could probably just click on there. Or not minimize it like that. Yeah. Shrink it down, drag that down. No. Okay. One moment, please. Some minor technical difficulties are occurring. Oh, slideshow right there. There we go. All right, how's that look?
That looks great.
All right. So my name is Ben French, and I'm from Johnson's Nursery. I'm the Vice President of Propagation and Product Development. So that's a fancy title for I grow plants. And I know more about them than anyone else at the company. So they gave me that title. So at Johnson's, I'm in charge of growing all of the little plants from various means. And we specialize in growing local eco-type natives. That's what we like the most. So we already heard about how good it is to plant native plants. But it's really important that you select a nursery that grows native plants that are from your ecoregion. If you look at the range map of any plant in North America, it usually spans from like Wisconsin over to Maine, down to Florida, over to Texas. So they have a really broad geographical range. If you take a plant in from like a place like Missouri and try to grow it up here, odds are that plant is going to have a hard time to grow. So always buy local eco-type natives. Make sure you ask your nursery where you're getting your plants. So Wisconsin, wonderful water resources. We heard about how we have to protect it from our previous presenter. Just look at that. That's got to be worth protecting. From our beautiful bogs and swamps in the North Woods to our ephemeral ponds in the southern forests in southeast Wisconsin. All of our wetlands are facing lots of challenges. Foreign diseases like emerald ash borer and Dutch elm disease have been destroying our wetland forests for the past 50 years. And it's really changing the way the water is moving through the landscape, in addition to all the impervious surfaces that we heard about before. So to make up for lost time, I kind of decided to talk about the easiest, fastest growing natives possible. So if you have a situation kind of like this, and you want to get some plants back into that landscape, these are the ones that are really good investments, great bang for your buck. So when I think of easy, I think of aspects like fast growing, fast spreading, and ecologically valuable. So not only are we getting a plant for fairly cheap and having good success with it at a high rate, we're adding lots of value to the system, helping clean our water, helping our water infiltrate, preserving our soil quality, and attracting wildlife to the site. And a lot of times in Wisconsin, that means an early successional plant. So after any disturbance, a lot of times those are the first plants on the scene. They're the ones that are going to do the most work for preserving your soil, converting that soil into organic matter, which is really good for more picky, sensitive species. And they're cheap and easy. Like that one picture you showed, Laura, of the poplars colonizing the field, that would be an example of an early successional tree. So my favorite tree in this category would be bur oak. This is just such a wonderful plant, and we should be proud to have such a diversity of specimens here in Wisconsin. Almost every place you go in Wisconsin, you can find big old specimens like this. Odds are a plant like that is a 250 to 300-year-old plant, and that's a great thing to see. It's fairly fast growing for an oak, probably 2 feet to 3 feet a year on average in its youth. As it ages, it slows down, just like anyone old, and it eventually goes down to like just a couple inches a year at this stage of maturity. Oak trees are one of the highest wildlife value plants out there. If anyone hasn't read Doug Tallamy's book, Bringing Nature Home, it explains in depth and with great scientific detail just how valuable plants are, specifically oak trees, to the local food chain. So not only is it creating acorns, which are attractive to turkeys, blue jays, squirrels, and chipmunks, bears as well, but also the foliage itself supplies caterpillars with all their nutrition. These caterpillars are in turn eaten by birds, which use those protein-rich insects to raise their young in spring. So this is incredible for songbirds as well as the typical acorn-eating wildlife. Oak trees in the wild typically have a really deep taproot, like the one on the right here. That taproot is an insurance policy securing that plant into position and giving it access to water deep in the ground. However, when it comes to moving plants, and that's what a nursery does, we move plants around, it's actually a hindrance because you cut that taproot and you damage just about 100% of that root system. You lose a ton of it and the tree often doesn't survive. Over the past 20 to 30 years at Johnson's, we've developed a way to root prune all of our oaks to make our oak trees into a fibrous rooted plant. And you guys just need to take away that our oak trees survive compared to others. We typically get a 90+% success rate with our transplanted oak trees. Another great tree would be hackberry, which is Celtis occidentalis. It has a beautiful kind of golden fall color, kind of a limey green, and kind of interesting warty bark. I included this plant on here because of its incredible tolerance to a wide range of soil conditions. So it can take it wet, it can take it dry, it can take it acidic, it can take it alkaline. and it just thrives in all of these locations. It makes a really small, kind of inconspicuous berry. You can kind of see them hiding underneath the leaves there on the left. And that fruit stays on the tree for most of the winter months. So this plant is really important for any songbird or other bird that sticks around through our Wisconsin winters. We have a big hackberry across the street from my house, and it had berries on it from October, November, December, and into January. And every day I would look out my window and count the number of birds in there. And it was probably on average 25 to 50 every day. Another good plant that you can invest early, is Populus tremuloides, which is quaking aspen. This is a fast-growing, quick colonizing tree. This is a member of the poplar family, and those are really good plants to put in really tough sites, and they spread quite rapidly. Their foliage is valuable to insects, and their ability to convert sterile soil into organic matter is really high. Some of the biggest organisms in the world are quaking aspen colonies in the mountain west. They've been suckering around and growing new trees in those mountains for thousands of years. Moving out of trees and into shrubs, we have gray dogwood. This is one of my recent favorites, especially in the battle against invasives. Gray dogwood is a small to medium size suckering shrub, and it kind of forms these broad colonies over time. The leaves themselves are not too conspicuous during the growing season, but as you approach fall, they usually turn a nice maroon color in the landscape like this. And different patches will turn kind of like different colors of maroon and purple through time. So if you have like a bunch of different individuals, you have like this display of purple coloration that's really nice. The fruits are important to birds because dogwood berries have a really high fat content. So they add like a different type of like food diversity for traveling birds. They have a very low sugar content, and since they have all that fat content, the birds are able to travel much further on that style fruit. When it comes to invasives, this is one of my favorite options because it seems like wherever healthy patches of gray dogwood grow, they kind of keep anything else from coming up underneath them. So if you're worried about how many buckthorn seedlings are coming back, this might be a good plant to consider to like reduce the number of growing seedlings. You can kind of see a patch here and how big they get over time. And you can see some like Canada goldenrod and milkweed and other stuff that's intermixed. And wherever you see the buckthorn in the background, you can see some like way back in here, over here at the edge of this one. But wherever the patch is, the buckthorn isn't. So this one little open spot in the patch that you see one buckthorn in there. So I think it might have an allelopathic tendency and is able to get rid of buckthorn seedlings. Another great suckering, fast-spreading plant is staghorn sumac. The Department of Transportation has been using this on highways for decades to great success. And they pile sterile soil and fill into heaps and then put a road on top of it, plant a couple seedlings of this plant in there, and they've got a beautiful colony within 5 to 10 years. So this is another great plant for birds, especially in winter. The fruits stick around all the way till almost spring by the time they get eaten. Beautiful red fall color, kind of a nice tropical look because of those big palmate leaves. So a little bit different look for the environment. Another really good one is the American plum, Prunus americana. This is another suckering shrub found throughout Wisconsin, and this one has a benefit to people in that it makes edible plums. So this is a great one to go out with kids and actually like pick different colored plums and eat them. They taste pretty good. Some taste better than others. It's got a really pretty display of white flowers in the spring. The problem with American plum is that it kind of looks like buckthorn. It's got like a shiny bark with lenticels and the leaves are pretty similar. So to the uninitiated, this might look like an invasive species. So a lot of times it gets accidentally extirpated from sites, even though it's a good plant. Chokecherry is another great plant for wildlife. It's got big displays of flowers in spring, followed by nice round black fruits in fall. If this plant gets just a little bit of sun, 4 or more hours a day, it is a prolific producer of berries. This has to be one of the best pound per pound producers of fruit in Wisconsin. This is a nice filler for the middle of summer because the berries are ready early compared to almost all the other fruits, which are ready much later in the season. These are often ready at the end of July and into August. So timing of fruit ripeness is really important for different bird species. This is also famous for being the poop on a stick plant that every naturalist loves to talk about. If this plant gets too shaded, it is really prone to a disease called black knot fungus, and it looks like poop on a stick. American elderberry is another good one. It's really vigorous and really good for mucky sites. And it'll occupy a site really quickly, spread fast, and it makes these huge panicles of white flowers in spring, like bigger than your head. They'll be like that big around. And after the panicles get pollinated, they turn into these nice deep purple fruits, which you can eat, I hear. They taste pretty good. You can make elderberry wine out of the flowers. So it's got good human as well as wildlife value. The wetter the site, the more you can use this plant. This is buttonbush. This has these little button-shaped white flowers, which one of my interns kind of pointed out that it kind of looks like the coronavirus. So that's topical for these days. This one tolerates the most water of any woody plant, except for maybe some willows. It can spend months underwater and grow just fine. This plant is incredibly attractive to pollinators, and it flowers late in summer, which is kind of unique. Not a lot of woody shrubs flower that late in the year. Almost all of their flowers are from prairie plants like asters and milkweeds. They're always blooming in the fall, but this is one of the few shrubs that does that too. So this is a good addition for a lot of wetlands, just for that fact alone. Red osier dogwood, famous for its beautiful red bark on its stems. A really great plant for any wet to medium spot. It has those fatty berries, a lot like gray dogwood does. So they're white and full of fat content. And this one is really nice, just ornamentally, it's beautiful. So a lot of people, would like this plant in their yard. Every couple of years, you can cut it back almost to the ground, like you see this picture on the left, and it'll re-sucker up beautiful red sprouts. So it's long lasting in the landscape. Moving out of shrubs into perennials, some of the easiest ones you can grow are red milkweed. So we talk about pollinators, preserving native species, getting plants to grow and infiltrate wetlands to reduce the amount of runoff. This one is a great one to put in because it's got incredibly vigorous root system, and it supports monarch butterflies, which is nice, and also other species too. See a bumblebee on this picture. It's got really nice red flowers in spring, and after they get pollinated, they turn into those little pods, and they turn into the floating seeds that we're so fond of with our milkweeds. So I had one of my interns count the number of seeds off of one plant once, and it was close to 3,000 off of one plant. So talk about bang for your buck. Culver's root, Veronicastrum, is a really nice plant to include in any wetland planting. It's got these tall spikes of white flowers, which add a little bit of a different flair to a typical planting. It occupies its space really well, so it makes like a little colony of itself, and it kind of seeds around and adds to the edge of ponds really well, into like cattails and stuff like that. So it tolerates a good wet condition. but the flowers are probably why it's most famous. Big leaf aster is a good option for any shady space near water, especially. It likes it a little bit moister, a little bit shadier. So this is a good shade option for those buckthorn clearings and forests. It occupies the ground layer really quickly, and it's got pretty big round leaves through the growing season. And this one also blooms in the fall with all the other asters. This one's got a nice bluish coloration, which is, interesting. But yeah, a really nice plant. So I think that kind of brings me to the end of my plant talk. I think it'll be really important for all of us in the future to work together and plant as many natives as we can and work together to make our roads a little less impervious, that we can catch a little more stormwater. And natives are a great way to help achieve all of our goals. And it doesn't take a big space to grow a lot of natives. This is just my front yard. If natives mean messy to you, then you're planting the wrong ones. Because natives, you can plant ones that barely get over a foot tall, that stay nice and short. You can see a bunch of different ones in here, like shooting star, prairie dropseed, nodding wild onion, and prairie smoke. So this is like May. This is June. We've got a whole different grouping of plants that are coming into bloom. Like those penstemons you see that are kind of white. I've got a lupine or two in there. The prairie smoke have stopped flowering and now they're going to seed. That's what that pink fluff stuff is. And you see the milkweeds are just starting to shoot out of the ground. Also, you can see my bur oak that I planted over there. And then this is July to August. So all of the prairie smoke is seeded out and the penstemons have gone to seed. And now we see plants like common milkweed, butterfly milkweed, and pale purple coneflower all coming into bloom now. So I've got flowers in the front of my yard year round, and almost none of it's over 2 feet tall. So even if you have a really small space like this, you can make a big difference. And we've seen rusty patch bumblebee in my front yard. Here's just some more pictures showing off, but you get the idea. So thank you everybody for listening. No matter what area you're working with, there's plenty of options for you. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. What a gorgeous yard. Beautiful job. Well, I have found the winners. It was number 6 and 8, which is Gloria and Jamie Hawkins. So if you two are willing to stick around until the very end, we can chat and I can share how you guys can collect your plants. But before we do that, I did want to open the floor up for questions. So feel free to put on the little reaction if you've got to raise your hand if you have a question, or feel free to come off mute.
I have a question. I am wondering about recommended native plants for an area that is part shade, so only gets a few hours of sunlight a day.
All right. So there are tons of natives that grow in shade. Is this shade caused by a house, or is it like a forested canopy type situation?
It's from the house.
Okay, so like the north side of your house?
Actually, it's the east side, but then the neighbor's house is close enough in the neighbor's tree that I'd say, is it about how many hours of sun is in that yard, that part? It's camp
in the middle of the day. I don't know.
There can't be more than about 3 hours, maybe 4 hours. And I do have some big leaf aster in there, and I do have some swamp milkweed. But I'm thinking about something else that's maybe a little, is there anything that's shorter?
Yeah, both of those are a little bit on the tall end. Like the big leaf aster, the flower stalks can be, pretty close to 2 feet. And swamp milkweed can be 3 to 4 feet in a really good site. Typically they're like 2 or 3. But some other really good options, and that's why I pulled up this slide here, hopefully you can see along with me, is a some various ferns, like lady fern, is a really good option for any shady spot, as long as the moisture is decent. If it's really dry shade, lady fern, which I'm kind of highlighting, can you guys see my mouse? Yep, yeah, so where I'm highlighting with my mouse, those are the lady ferns there. Another really good one would be this sedge that's down here. This is ivory sedge, which is Carex eburnia. It almost looks like lawn, but the roots go really deep and it's really tolerant of deep shade. So you see, even as this is a shade area on the east side of my garage, and this is under a plum tree, which is under a viburnum, which is growing under a fern, and you can still see it's green. So it's incredibly shade tolerant. Some other good ones you can try are Jack in the Pulpit, which is a spring ephemeral that comes up pretty early in the spring, kind of flowers in May and June, but it has its leaves all the way up through early summer. And it's got a beautiful red fruit cluster in the fall, which is attractive to different wildlife. Some other short plants that you could do are like bristle leaf sedge or eastern star sedge, which is a really nice one. Some kind of grassy textures to put in there. And as far as asters go, you've already got big leaf aster. Hopefully it's doing well. And then some other ones are heartleaf aster.
Okay.
And shooting star, which is not too sun fast, but you can plant it at the edge of your bed and it'll bloom in spring while all the trees are still leafless. And it'll go dormant by midsummer.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have a question from Emily. Do you have a list of non-toxic native plants that are safe for kids and dogs?
I believe we do have a list compiled at the nursery, and that's like a really good question. That actually came up the other day too, for a place that was a memory care unit was looking to make a garden, and they wanted to make sure all of their plants were safe too. A lot of berries that you see in the wild are not safe to eat. So yeah, I would say we have a pretty good list, and we could delete some stuff that we would say is toxic. So that's something we're probably going to be compiling pretty soon here because we keep hearing about it. But we have pretty good knowledge at our nursery, so we can help suss out the plants if you have like a plant palette you want to use.
Ben, if you Emily, if you share your email with me, and Ben, if you have a chance to find that list, I can get that email to you.
Yep.
Great. And then our next question is from John. He asks, is there good native plants for planting up against the house? While the roots are great for water, is roots growing into the foundation something to be concerned about?
Yep, that is certainly something to be concerned about. You remember that picture of all those prairie plants with the really deep roots? If your foundation is like mine and might have a few little seams in it, you could end up channeling more water into your basement. So if you wanted to plant stuff real close to your house, I would stick with things that are more carpet forming and rhizome forming. So like big leaf aster would be a real good option for that, because really the roots only go down like 6 inches, maybe a foot. Or you could do like lots of different stone crops. There's some native sedums you could try. A lot of the sedges that are woodland sedges don't grow very deep. And a lot of spring ephemerals have a fairly shallow and temporary root system as well, just because they like to grow in spring when there's no leaves, and then they go dormant pretty early. Ferns would be pretty harmless. They have very, I would say, weak root systems. Once they're in place, they're pretty sturdy, but they take a long time to establish. And I don't think they're going to cause any problems down deep.
So Deborah asks, she said, I ordered blue mist flower for a native perennial shade garden to plant this spring, but I read it's pretty aggressive. Any thoughts?
Which plant was that? Sorry.
Blue mist flower.
Yep. I've grown that plant before and it is incredibly aggressive. I believe it is a US native. I don't think it's a Wisconsin native, if memory serves. The flowers are okay. They're actually more purple than blue, so that was disappointing. And then it was a really aggressive plant too. I think that plant should probably be reserved for restoration style gardening in the eastern United States. I don't know if it's entirely appropriate for Wisconsin sites. And then also, if you guys do come up with questions here that I'm not around to answer for, we have a great resource for everybody to access at any time. We have a what's called our knowledge base on johnsonsnursery.com. And it's got all sorts of articles and information on different plants. Basically, every plant we grow has its own spec sheet, and you can look into all the different features that you'd want to ever know about it.
I just put in the chat box as well, your Wisconsin native plant guide. That is so excellent.
Yep, that's a great one too. And I've been corrected. It's jniplants.com.
Any final questions for the group? We're hitting it right at 7:29, so perfect timing, you guys.
You can talk about the wheat plan you planted. No.
This is John again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Oh, okay. I don't want to monopolize it, but I do have a quick other question. As far as I know, like we just purchased the house about a year ago, and the main problem we're having in regards to like invasive is I know it is like creeping Charlie, and I know a lot of the neighbors like kind of spray herbicides. Is there any like native plants that can kind of outcompete that, even though the very nature of being invasive, maybe not, but I just thought I'd ask.
Yep, so creeping Charlie is in the mint family. It kind of spreads and vines along. Really, the place that's most invasive is in lawns, because it's a really low growing plant. It creeps between the blades and then pops up a little bit over your grass. It has a slightly allelopathic and shading tendency, so it ends up killing your lawn. If you remove it one time, like scrape it off of a site and plant some native stuff there, very often it's going to be removed or at least minimized in that spot. So on my lawn, on the front lawn here, that was almost all creeping Charlie when we moved in. And we just scraped the lawn off, planted all these natives, and it's basically gone. So every once in a while you find like a little strand, and I'm trying to see if I can see it in the pictures here. But a lot of times it takes the back seat to all of the other plants that are just because they're bigger, they outcompete it. Yeah, I don't even see one in here anymore. But anyway, I'm sure it's in there somewhere, but it's at least minimized to the point where it's not a problem plant in your site.
Good question. My dad sits in the lawn and likes to pull it out like one by one. So yeah, maybe you just get rid of some lawns. That's a good idea. I like that.
Yeah,
any other final questions?
The roots on creeping Charlie are only about like that big. So it's super easy to pull out. It's super easy to hoe off a big patch of it. Like you could do 20 square feet in like 30 minutes. If you're sipping a beer.
The only way to landscape, right? All right, I believe I was able to chat with one of the winners. So Gloria, if you can send me your email and a private message, then I can get this email to you. But please do, Gloria and Jamie, stay on with me for a minute. We'll chat. But other than that, I think that we are ready to close up shop here. So thank you all for coming.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thank you for hosting Sierra Club.
Thanks for doing this, guys. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's Laura.
Hey, Gloria.
Hi.
Congrats on winning.
Thank you.
Awesome. I'm going to log off too. I'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye. See you later. Hey, Gloria, can you send me your email?
Well, I'm happy to do that if I could figure out how to do that.
So on the bottom of the screen, it'll say chat.
Oh, here. Right. Yeah.
Well, let's see.
Oh, do I
You can
stop
start sharing.
recording too?
Um,
Because I think we were recording.
I'm on an iPad.
Okay. Or actually, if you
I
don't mind, well, it's up to you.
There it is.
I could
or-
just,
Sorry,
I could just email you
that
or
would
just
work
give it
too.